Hey guys, Mr. Pokke here, back with another video. Welcome to another episode of CN Hypewatch, where we will be going through the CN community's opinion for an upcoming banner unit, this time featuring Topaz. These are strictly speculations from the CN community talking about our kit. If you guys would like CN's pooling opinion for version 1.4, then kindly check out my previous video on Jingyuan/Topaz pooling opinions. Ever since 1.0, our next hunt unit has finally arrived, and she doesn't really function as like a main DPS compared to Sile. For Topaz being our first 5-star limited fire hunt, Topaz is definitely looking to shake things up from the era of destruction units, and it won't be an easy achievement. All 3 limited destruction units have been exceptional in their performance so far, both in terms of damage numbers and their ease of usage. Could we finally see the rise of follow-up DPS, or possibly even dual DPS comps overthrowing the current hyper carry setup? Leave your thoughts in the comment down below as to whether Topaz can perform up to par. Here is a summary for the resource required to raise Topaz to essentially level 8 tracers, not level 10, because in my opinion, level 8 tracers is a very good stopping point for any unit, and when going towards level 10, it's just going to cost us exponential amounts of resources, especially in terms of credits and tracers. Feel free to screenshot this for your own reference. And moving on, as mentioned in my previous CN Hypewatch, I'm not here to discredit any other content creators, since their opinions stem from a perspective that holds their own logic and reasoning. This series is not intended to be a guide, and for Topaz guide, kindly check out my future CN unit analysis so as to get a more in-depth explanation as to how her kit works, as well as the team compositions, relics and litecoins, etc, etc. Right? These are purely opinions and speculations on future units, and with that out of the way, let's just jump straight into today's content. Taking a look at her first individual speculation, that's gonna be her unit archetype. To make it clear, Topaz is definitely not meant to be a main DPS, and as such, it will be pretty unfair to compare Topaz to other main DPS units. Instead, she's very much similar to Silver Wolf, but do note that she's a little bit more restrictive in team compositions to only follow-up DPS, whereas Silver Wolf, you can essentially just use her anywhere, right? So looking through the lens of a support instead of a DPS, Topaz does impressive damage with the help of Numbi, while also providing support capabilities tied to raising the follow-up attack damage output via Proof of Death, right? So at the same time, she's also not skill point intensive, since Numbi's action value increase is boosted up by the follow-up attacks or all attacks during Windfall Bonanza, as long as it affects the target with Proof of Death, right? A key phrase we have discovered during the live stream event is that at the start of an ally's turn, if there are no enemies with Proof of Death on the field, then Topaz will cause a random enemy to enter Proof of Death. This is somewhat equivalent to Silver Wolf being able to implant a weakness even without using her skill, albeit the target is at random. Now, with all this being discussed, in CN's opinion, judging Topaz with the criteria of how much damage can Topaz output herself is very illogical, similar to how you shouldn't compare an E0 Silver Wolf's damage output with a main DPS as like Sile just to see her value. If players instead ignore her path as a hunt unit and instead just think of her as like any other Harmony or Nihility support, then Topaz value suddenly looks a lot more appealing, being able to deal respectable amounts of damage while buffing other follow-up attacks outside from Topaz at the same time, just like how Kafka buffs DOT archetypes while still dealing high damage herself. As for her actual multipliers, as usual, we will have to wait for Topaz release before diving in deeper during her unit analysis. Another thing for her individual speculation is her relic, and most players might be thinking of getting the Fire 4-piece, but unfortunately, Fire 4-piece effect is just really suboptimal even for fire units. Aside from the 10% fire damage increase, the 4-piece effect is much weaker, for example compared to Quantum 4-piece defense threat and Imaginary and Ice 4-piece crit value increase. Even having Musketeer's 12% attack would be more beneficial than Fire's 4-piece, just because of how restrictive it is, being only activated after using an ultimate, and skill damage increase honestly is just not that great for Topaz anyways. Taking a look at some rough calculations, the 4-piece fire is actually weaker than 2+2 fire Musketeer and even 4-piece Quantum without Quantum weakness. Now of course, further testing will be required, but players don't have to go out of their way finding the perfect fire 4-piece like myself has mistakenly done so, right? All that being established, CN actually don't believe that any of our current relic sets perfectly suit Topaz. Since Topaz is not a main DPS, her damage output being at its absolute highest in its current version is not a priority, and CN players would be looking forward to the new potential relic sets in the future before committing their stamina in improving Topaz. Now, I personally don't know what's the new relic set, nor will I discuss it. The CN community just feels that in the future, there's going to be better sets that may fit Topaz, and that's why they will not dump a lot of stamina to build up Topaz. And that's really it for Topaz individual speculation, because like I mentioned, for the most part, she really is not meant to be a main DPS. She's more so like a supportive DPS, sub DPS kind of thing. So we'll be taking a little bit more look into her team speculations, because that's where she really starts to shine, and there's a lot of different opinions stemming from who should she be ran with, right? That's one of the highest discussed topic right now before Topaz is released. So Topaz team comps, it is very specific because she requires teammates that can help Nambi's action value increase via follow-up attacks, as well as dealing increased damage on targets afflicted with proof of death, which is basically follow-up attacks as well. These are all strictly speculations, so do take this with a pinch of salt before overcommitting to any of these units prior to Topaz release. Right, so the first thing that we were going to take a look at, which is also the most important thing, that's going to be the DPS units that we can run with Topaz. Currently, there are two key units that CM players are really thinking highly of, which is essentially Clara as well as Himiko. Right, Clara has the highest amount of follow-up attacks from any units right now we have in the current roster, and Himiko, she has very frequent follow-up attacks as well, as long as you can stagger your breaks. Jingyuan is in a very unique position, and I'll also reserve a section for him later on, but for now, Clara and Himiko looks to be one of the stronger contenders for Topaz. Right, other units with follow-up attacks such as Herta, Blade, Kafka, Yanqing, and Qingque, they either require high idolence to make follow-up attack a bigger portion of their damage output, or their follow-up attacks are simply not as consistent as the three mentioned previously, from either a lack of damage or a lack of frequency. So between the top two contenders, Clara is looking to be an extremely synergistic team with Topaz by having the highest number of follow-up attacks across anyone here, right? Which leads to a very high Nambi damage output, as well as benefiting from the proof of death's debuff. But keep in mind, there is one downside, which is that the proof of death, it only affects a single target. So Clara's follow-up damage increase as well as Nambi's action value advance will only work when that specific unit gets hit by Clara's follow-up attack, right? So if the target with proof of death does not hit Clara, and unless the Clara is E6 or she's under the ultimate buff where she has an AoE splash damage from her follow-up attack, then Topaz skill and Nambi's damage output would not have as much value. On the other hand, Himiko is a DPS that also works really well with Topaz due to her follow-up triggering per weakness break. And this follow-up, unlike Clara, it hits all enemies every single time, right? She doesn't need to rely on any buffs from Clara's ultimate, which means that proof of death as well as Nambi's action value advance is guaranteed to trigger, right? It's guaranteed to proc, benefiting both Topaz damage output as well as Himiko's damage output. This can be extremely powerful with stages that has multiple targets for us to break. As long as we stagger the units, right? We break the mobs and then we break one idiot at a time, then we're going to have a lot of different weakness breaks, so staggering them will be key in raising the overall team DPS for Himiko and Topaz. Now, in CN's perspective, they are very much anticipating the rise of this potential new duo DPS setup, right, for both Clara and Himiko along with Topaz, because frankly speaking, the current hyper carry comp, it seems to be a dime in a dozen nowadays, and as long as the meta is fresh and we get to access new team comps and enjoy new players' experience in Memory of Chaos, then things are looking to be very promising. So CN community is definitely looking forward to testing them out once it releases, right? And as for the actual performance of whether a duo DPS setup will work, whether they are better or weaker than hyper carry setups, then only time will tell. Now, talking about Jingyuan, Jingyuan is in a little bit of a mixed camp amongst the CN community. Some players really think that he's going to work super well with Topaz, while on the other hand, some players think that the current Jingyuan comp is really perfect as it is, and he really just doesn't need any other support such as Topaz, right? So I'll be adding subtitles to this particular CN community's video, which summarizes his potential team placement alongside Topaz.
那警员呢，这期重点说一下，在看到托帕后啊，很多警员玩家都在开香槟。在我大致介绍完托帕的机制后，大家感觉托帕很适合警员吗？首先，警员的追击不频繁，无法一直给张张拉条。其次，托帕只增加追击的伤害，但是警员的战绩大招占总输出量的40%左右。大家想一想，只给追击增伤啊，并且还需要高频的追击来拐自己的角色，和警员在一起真的适配吗？我们想一想警员的队伍构成，停云首先是必须的吧，这个没有异议。警员刚需停云的能量来释放大招，其次需要一个加速或者拉条的角色，让警员频繁释放战技。那艾斯达大 牙牙2选1。你可以考虑穿个速度鞋把这个格子省掉，但是这样就辜负了警员的高倍率和高双爆。最重要的是警员的追击不频繁，托帕没有大招的时候，杖杖被拉条的次数少，托帕带充能神，杖杖又没有伤害，警员又少了个辅助，这就导致大家都没有伤害。除非以后出个角色，这个角色不仅可以完成停云充能的工作，还能再加一项别的功能，比如说拉条或者加速或者奶人。只有出了这个角色，托帕警员才有同时上场的可能。充能这个属性不仅对警员来说至关重要，对托帕来说也十分关键。大招不仅可以强化杖杖的伤害，最重要的是能让杖杖被追击以外的攻击拉条。所以托帕需要别的角色或者是自己的命座去解放充能绳。我们就假设这个角色可以充能加奶人，那队伍组成就是充能奶加警员加托帕加艾斯达或者大丫丫，变成了追击双 C 队。那有的观众表示感觉不如警员单 C， 那你指的是全员0+0啊？当你的警员有了专武托帕1+1的情况下，这将是警员上限最高的队伍，没有质疑。
Essentially it boils down to this. Jingyuan functions better as a hyper carry, and he would much rather just maintain his 2 supports, key being Tingyuan plus either Asta or Bronya, than to give up one of these supports just to add in Topaz, right? Number one, he definitely needs Tingyuan for the incredible energy battery, as well as the damage percentage, as well as the potential to run Planetary Rendezvous to increase lightning damage percentage, while he also needs either Asta or Bronya to ensure that he has enough action cycles to maintain a 10-stack lightning lot consistently, right? And using Topaz instead of either Asta or Bronya, it might not be worth the trade-off if we are not able to consistently hit 10 stacks on lightning lot, right? So another point is that both Bronya and Tingyuan, they are single target buffers, so either Topaz or Jingyuan, they will suffer from a lack of buffs if we're going to be running them together in the same comp. Not to mention, a lightning lot is not all of Jingyuan's damage output. In fact, roughly 40% of Jingyuan's damage output is still coming from his ultimates as well as his skill. So in this sense, these ultimates and skills, they will not benefit whatsoever from Topaz's kit. Unless, of course, if you're going to be using Topaz ultimate during Windfall Bonanza, then Jingyuan's skills and ultimates, they can still increase Nami's action value increase, but the uptime is definitely not as high. That being said, in the future, there may be a possibility of new units that can see both Jingyuan and Topaz fitting in the same comp, such as a support that can buff both of the energy at the same time, or a support that can increase the action value of all summoned units like Nambi and Lightning Lord together. For now, a standard hyper carry comp should fit Jingyuan much more comfortably as compared to just trying to force Topaz with Jingyuan. At the end of the day, players can definitely go ahead and try them out themselves, because as we know, most content Honkai Star Rail, it is not safe, extremely difficult. So even if you guys don't run the comp that deals the highest possible amount of damage, as long as you guys are having fun, then it's definitely viable, right? Now let's move on to the support categories that can work really well with Topaz. Considering that Topaz is not an optimal main DPS, running supports that can buff both Topaz as well as the main DPS Topaz is tied up with, that would be the ideal situation, and one that instantly comes to most of our minds is going to be Asta. Right? She has a team-wide attack buff, a team-wide speed buff, as well as a team-wide fire damage percentage buff from both her major traits as well as Planetary Rendezvous. Asta is looking to be extremely good support for Topaz team comps, just like how Pella is perfect for Jingliu team comps, right? So Topaz, she needs to be fast in order to ensure the higher ultimate uptime, which is going to be a big portion of her damage output, since this is going to be tied to Nambi, and the buffs provided from the ultimate is going to greatly increase Nambi's damage potential. Now, in order to ensure this ultimate uptime, then Topaz will inevitably have to forego the attack boots or maybe even the attack rope for speed boots and energy regeneration rope, which means Topaz as a kid, she might be in a dire need for more attack, and Asta's team-wide attack buff will perfectly fill this void and provide the much needed attack that Topaz requires if she wants to still maintain her ultimate uptime. Next, in terms of opportunity cost, Asta unfortunately also doesn't fit as well with other DPS at the moment, with many of them preferring Harmony units like Bronya and Tingyuan instead, leaving poor Asta to be the runt of the litter. However, with the introduction of Topaz, this shall be no more, and Asta should fit very well with Topaz as her best in slot support. Other Harmony units, like I mentioned, like Bronya, Tingyuan, they're generally more targeted towards single target buffs, and we'll be discussing their strength in the future team comp video, right? But moving on from that, debuffers like Pella and Steel Wolf, they will always be universal picks, since debuff they can affect anyone that's attacking the target, but at the end of the day, Asta's synergy is still very much preferred. And finally, one last thing to talk about her team composition is going to be the sustain. With regards to sustain, Topaz does not prefer shields as much as heals or full strength damage mitigation, and this is mainly due to Topaz standing as a supportive DPS that wants to build speed, right? So after adding Asta to the team composition, shields would probably go down extremely quickly once Topaz reach like 170, 180 or even 200 speed, right? So a shield usually lasts for 2 turns, such as support shield. So once those 2 turns are up, then essentially the shield is going to be wasted on Topaz. She's just not even going to benefit from the shield at all. Of course, this point is negligible. If you're able to defeat the enemies with ease, essentially you don't really care about the sustain whatsoever, or if players can time the shields at the right moment before a heavy attack from the enemy, such as True Sting's ultimate where he charges up and then just deal a ton of damage to your entire team. And with that, we've come to the end of Topaz CN Hypewatch. Let me know what you guys think in the comment. What are your thoughts about Topaz? Are you going to be pulling for her? What are your expectations for Topaz? Is she really going to be able to finally end the era of hypercarry team comps, right? So if you guys would like to engage in further discussions, feel free to check out my Discord. That's going to be Pokke's Village, where we have a very active community talking about Honkai Star Rail on a daily basis, right? If you guys want to check out my stream, that's going to be twitch.tv/MrPokke. I stream 3 times per week. Schedule will be updated on Discord as well. And with that, we've come to the end of today's content, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.